Hello everybody, today I'm going to be going over how to set up multiple instances of Octoprint on the same machine. Now, before I even start, I'm going to say that you're probably going to want to stay away from a Raspberry Pi for doing this. It only has one USB controller on it. It doesn't support much power going through that USB controller, because you're kind of limited to the power that the Pi is actually getting. Um, it's just much better to have an actual desktop or laptop computer to do your Octoprint server on. If you go with a newer one, you can also do your slicing on it as well. So that's another advantage of using a regular computer. You can just have everything, have your server, print, basically have all your printing stuff on one machine, and it can just kind of sit there and hum away in the background, and you don't have to worry about it too much because it's not a Windows computer, so it's not going to just randomly reboot on you unless there's a hardware problem. But you've got more problems if you've got that. Also, too, a lot of people say that Octoprint is a terrible experience. They've had all sorts of problems with printing, and I think that also goes down to the Raspberry Pi that was used. I wasn't able to get much information out of these people. Like, they wouldn't tell me what version of Raspberry Pi or what kind of USB cable or anything like that. If it's a Raspberry Pi 1, it's probably going to have some problems doing printing with a modern printer. Also, too, a lot of these printers ship with these really crappy cables, these blue cables. They're garbage. Throw them out. You can get a cable very, very cheaply. There's no need to screw around with what was shipped with the printer because these cables are just terrible. So, after you actually have your computer, the next thing you want to know is what operating system to put on there. If you're looking at that, I would suggest if you got an older hardware, Xubuntu is probably going to be your solution. It'll run on just about anything. The next step up would be Lubuntu, and then if you have fairly decent modern hardware like this computer here, I have just regular Ubuntu with GNOME installed on it. On top of that, that's a little bit beyond what this tutorial is, but something Debian based, because these are all based on Debian. Something Ubuntu, something along those lines is probably going to be your best bet. Now, once you have all of the operating system installed, all your updates done, now it's time to open up the terminal. So, first off, you're going to want to do your updates. So, sudo apt update. It should be already updated, but it's never a terrible idea to make sure that it's updated. Also, too, if you have any if there was any problems with installing updates, this will kind of give you some errors that you can work through with someone. Let's say there was an update that had failed and you can't install any packages. Well, it hangs up the installer. So if you're doing it this way, you can kind of see some different errors, and if you're running into problems, it's a little bit easier to get the actual errors and send to someone else to kind of figure out what's going on, get some support. So that's all good. Do an upgrade, make sure that's all good. Nothing's there. So next to install is the packages. Python 2.7, Python 2.7 dev. Python pip get virtualenv. So the first two are going to be your Python and Python dev. And well, I guess the first three will be all your Python stuff that you'll need to install this package. Get is going to be used to download the repository, which is going to have all the project files that's going to be used to generate your Octoprint server. And virtualenv gives you a virtual environment. So this is how I'm able to set up multiple instances of Octoprint. So we're going to go ahead and install those. Everything's installed, obviously, because I have the print servers running already. So once that's all done, git clone, git github.com fuzzle octoprint.git. Make sure that's all good. That's all good. Just gotta clone that all down. Gonna be almost there. And I'll have all these commands down in the description once I put this up on the internet. Alright, so that's all good. We're going to change directory into Octoprint. And if you wanted to change this folder's name to something else, like print servers or something like that, you can go ahead and do that. If you wanted to put like a version number on it or something along those lines, that way in future, if you wanted to have like keep an older version, this would be the time to do that, because you can't really change this one after the fact without changing a bunch of other stuff. But I'm going to leave it as a default. So I'm going to change directory into that. Virtualenv. Then you name this however you want to name them. I'm going to do first instance. It's going to take a second to go through and set up the directories. And you're going to do this for each one of your printers that you want to do. Or print servers, I should say. So once that's all set up, you're going to do / whatever you named it, bin pip install in a period. So that's going to tell it to install into that directory. And this will take a little bit. Now, for your actual hardware, I would kind of look at like Sandy and Ivy Bridge. Series of Intel, if you're going to go with the older ones. You could get away with like a Core 2 Duo or a dual core Pentium. You're not going to be able to do as many, streams and print servers at the same time. So if you only need like a couple of them, you need like 3 or 4 or something like that. Like a Pentium is probably going to be able to handle all of that just fine, along with the USB streams or whatever. If you're going anything more crazy with that, or if you have like a Delta printer, or you have a Core XY or something like that, you might want to have a little bit more horsepower, but that should be able to handle. Like if all you're doing is just print servers and USB streams, Core 2 Duo would be like the lowest, the lowest tier to actually go on that. On the AMD side, that would be like an Athlon 2 or Athlon 64X2, I think, is going that far back. Do more than a single core processor. I think in that generation there were like a Celeron processor that was a single core. Oh, look at that, it's finished. I'm gonna do the second instance. It's gonna go through the same process. Yeah, I think there were some processors that were single core. I would at least do a dual core. Alright, going back to the thing here. Second, this is, you saw it the first time. Just takes a second to do this. Yeah, I think there was a Celeron D that was a single core that used the same socket as a Core 2 Duo. It was just kind of complete weak sauce, and I would recommend staying away from those. But you're getting really, really old, and those machines are probably crushed by this point because they were terrible back in the day. And then if you go with a newer computer, like I said, you can do some slicing stuff, and you can do like Samba, set it up so it's like a Windows share. So if you do all your design work on Windows, you can throw it on that machine. And then another added benefit too is there's a lot of really nice utilities for doing backups. So if you're doing your designing on a Windows computer, you can copy it to that, and you can have it set up so it automatically backs up to another hard drive or another machine, so you can keep a lot of your settings and stuff safe. Alright, so back to the task at hand. that's all done. So one of the other things that you would want to do, this is something that I completely forgot about. A-G dial out, and then there'll be your username. So usermod-a-g. So what this does is adds this user to whatever group it is. So in this case, it's a dialout, which is how the printer is going to actually connect is over a serial terminal. And in Linux, it's like serial terminals are used for modems and stuff. So you need to be part of that dialout group. So you can so this user can actually access things through Octoprint. So if you don't have that, it's going to give you some weird errors. So you run that, you log out, you log back in, everything will work perfectly fine when you plug in your printer through the USB. So if you're getting weird errors, that's you probably missed that guy right there. So that's pretty much all of the setup for setting up the print servers. The next part would be setting up your what's it called? Your script for running this on reboot. So this will be like keeping it as a, so when you boot up your computer, these processes are already running. So these would be like your boot scripts, I guess. So I'm going to make a server file right here. And this will be something that will be in the description below. But I'm just going to kind of walk through what's actually going on here because it'll make a little bit more sense. So I'm making a bash file. We're going to go home, username, Octoprint, first instance, then Octoprint serve, serve, give it the port, that's actually a dash, and since I already have a couple of instances while they're running, I'm going to do this one as 502 or 5002. I'm going to tell that to go into nothing. And this guy right here is actually kind of a key thing to have, is this ampersand. If you don't have that, it's going to do some weird things. Oops. Wow. Wow, that's annoying. Alright, so this first part is going to be your directory. You're going to tell it to serve on port 5002. You're going to pipe all of the output into nothingness, and this is going to tell it to go into the background. So that's the process there. We're going to create a second one. That'll be for our second instance. There's our second instance. Put a new line there and exit 0. So this is going to be how you're going to set up all of your scripts. And then we're going to chmod that plus x to server.sh. And then we're going to test our script by typing in that. And everything is good. Everything ran properly. We can verify that by doing that. You're going to see the 5002, 5003. So PS aux. So these are all the processes that are running. And I'm just grabbing anything that has Octo in it. So you can see the ones that were there when I did the reboot. And these are the entries afterwards. Now, the final step would be setting up your cron job. So these will want to run at reboot. So we're going to do cron tab -e, which is for edit. And you're going to want to do it along these lines. So the @ symbol, reboot, space, and then the wherever your script is actually stored. So this is the one that I did for my first setup. So for this one, it's going to be something along the lines of Octoprint server.sh, and then when I save and quit this, it will start on reboot. So at this point, you'd want to reboot your computer, make sure that these processes actually come back up with everything. If when you ran that script earlier, if that gave you any errors, you'd want to fix that before going to this. If it's not working, you're going to need to go back and make sure your reboot thing here is actually set up properly. Make sure you don't have any misspellings. There's not a lot here that can go wrong. So if you found this useful, give it a thumbs up, like it, whatever, thumbs down. If you hate my voice, that's perfectly fine. I think that kind of covers everything that you would need to know for setting it up. For some people, the hardware might be kind of like a hard thing to kind of figure out what they would want. Getting into Linux is a little bit difficult, but there's a lot of tutorials on there. This is all stuff that you can, I use Linux all the time, so it's going to be a lot easier. So easier for me to go through it, but I understand that someone who's not very fluent with it might have kind of some struggles. But once you get through it and get it set up, it's actually pretty stable. You don't have to do too much with it. It's going to prompt you for updates when you have a GUI. I would suggest having a GUI because that's going to be a little bit easier for people to kind of get into it and get used to it. There's no weird power settings really. It's usually set up to turn off the screen, but if you do have any power things, it's going to be, just like changing stuff in Windows, you're going to look for power settings. Yeah, it's mainly going to blank the screen. I think that's usually what happens. It rarely ever suspends on its own. So really, there's nothing really too crazy. You don't really have to reboot this too often. I mean, I would suggest rebooting it maybe once a month if you start running into problems. But even then, it's I've had machines, Linux desktops that have been running for months on end and never been rebooted. So like I said, if you like it, cool. If not, oh well. Have a nice day. Thank you.